Welcome to the Wellness Plus podcast, brought to you by wellnessplus.tv. I'm your host, Corrina Rachel, and I'm joined today by Jewels Harrison. Thank
Hi,
you so
Corrina.
much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me back again.
So Jewels is an organizational and well-being expert. She's an author, and she specializes in teaching people to have more powerful, satisfying relationships. We talked in a previous episode about the biggest mistakes made in relationships. It kind of revolved a bit around women and the common mistakes that we as women make. But I think it's interesting that the majority of the people you work with are actually younger males. So I was hoping to do an episode on what women want and what types of tricks and tips that you have for all of the male listeners out there on how they can have better relationships.
Tips and tricks. Yeah, I think it's interesting. You know, a lot of times people talk about how we train men to treat us the way that they do. And some of the ways that we do that is pretty interesting, and that kind of falls back on, right, what do women do that gets in the way of what they really want? And really all of these principles that I share around how to create and uphold partnership, whether it's in your personal relationship or with your kids or your employees or your boss, or right? Mm-hmm. All of these things are... It's not your typical, here's a list of tips and tricks to check off the list. It's actually a way of being. And so it's a practice and awareness that you can develop that affects who you show up as in the world. And then that best version of you is available to all of those people in your life. So I don't really have a list of tips and tricks, I'm sorry, but I do have, I think, some really valuable information that I can share that will help men understand why things sometimes become so challenging in understanding the women in their life. And literally this can be fathers with their little girls or with their soon-to-be teenage girls. And it can be men trying to understand their girlfriends or wives or even their mothers. It's very interesting to me. There was a gentleman that was sharing about how upset his mom was that he'd just broken up with his girlfriend. I mean, she was really upset, way more than he was even. And he was having trouble understanding why. And so we were talking about it, and, you know, she said to him, I just got her to like me. And you broke up with her. So we were talking about this, and what he realized was that his mom was hallucinating that when he had a woman in his life, that she was going to get replaced. He's an only child, and he's been really close with his mom his whole life. She's a single mom who raised him. And when I brought this to his attention, that she was maybe living out this story that she had made up, that when there's another important woman in his life, that she would get replaced. And so she was doing whatever she could to establish a connection and relationship with the woman. And so he took her aside. It was actually right around Mother's Day, and took her out to lunch. And he just let her know, Mom, there's no one who will replace you in my life. And it was huge. I mean, it was huge for their relationship. She felt safer. And really, that's the number one thing that I would alert men to, is as many things that we have that are similar in just being human beings, right? there are actual things that are different about how our brains are constructed and the hormones and what the hormones do inside of our bodies. And so women have, and I've mentioned this before, we have a bigger worry center in our brain. Our language center is also bigger. It's why we can go blah, 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 and their eyes just glaze over. Men have a tendency as testosterone-based human beings to have single focus. They do one thing at a time. And as women, it requires a lot of extra effort in order to have focus. And I actually have a soapbox about this. I have a soapbox about it because we are in the work world, right? We're out in the world, we're earning our own, and it requires a lot of testosterone, more than what our bodies are physically capable of producing, in order to keep up that kind of longevity that testosterone allows for that. And some men have up to 30 times more testosterone in their bodies than women.
Wow.
That's a real thing. And when you talk to women and you ask how they're doing, like the consensus among most women, the way they'll answer is, I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted. And the reason for that is because we use up the amount of natural occurring testosterone in our body. And then we start to tax our adrenal glands. And over a period of time, they can even shut down. And what that occurs as is like fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, Lyme's disease, all these mystery diseases that have no cure, and they have very, very similar symptoms. So depending on which doctor you go to and beg for help, it also, you'll have some doctors who say it's your hormones are off. Your hormones are off. Well, yeah, they're off because they're completely depleted. And so it's really, really imperative that we learn how, as women, how to become aware of what we need and then enroll the people in our lives to support us in getting that. And so I'm going to jump backwards because I kind of skipped forward a little bit there, that the worry center in our brain is larger than it is in men. So one of the number one things that you can do as a man is to find out what your partner worries about. How is it that they feel unsafe? And what can you do or say in any given moment that will help them to remember that they're safe and that you're on their side, you're on their team, and that you'll protect them from the tiger? I never am not worried about who is going to help protect me from the tiger, especially being a single woman. And I traveled all over the country, coast to coast, in my RV with my little dog, who's a boy, Mochi. He's also sitting at my feet right now. He's such a good boy. But just even knowing that I had him there, he's not a big dog, but he has kind of a big dog bark. And he's a really good watchdog. So when I would hear something at night, my nervous system would flare up. Am I safe? And knowing that I had him there, it made a difference. Right. Yeah, he was my little protector. And men, naturally, in their DNA, are protectors and providers. It provides them with a sense of satisfaction to be able to protect and provide in whatever way. And our culture right now is a very challenging place to know how to be a good man in our culture right now and what that looks like.
Right. And the whole, I feel, idea of gender roles is something that's largely being challenged.
Yeah.
And understandably so, but it doesn't change the fact that, we have our biological differences. And even in a culture that's now trying to change those gender roles in many ways, there's still so much pressure on us from whichever different direction, that it can become confusing or overwhelming. And so what would be your suggestion? How can men, feel more comfortable in taking on that role of, the safety, the protection, the providing?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it can be very, very subtle. And many men do it, and we don't even notice. So there was a woman who just was listening to this on a podcast myself, and I loved the example that she gave. She came out of the gas station bathroom, and her partner was standing there watching another woman from a distance who was pumping gas, and it was in Oakland, and they guys would come around and offer to wash the windshield, and sometimes, it can be dangerous, like a shakedown, and this woman was by herself, and so I'm trying to remember who it was that I was listening to, and it's just not coming to me right now. So if you're listening and this is your story, I apologize. But she was ready to go, and she's like, "Okay, honey, I'm ready to go." And he's like, "Hold on just a minute." And she watched him, and he was just watching to make sure she got back into her car safely and onto the road. Mm-hmm. And so we as women have this idea of how unsafe men are. And there was a study done recently to really try to create some real data around men who are potentially dangerous. And they did it on a college campus, and thousands of men that they interviewed for this. And they did it in such a way where they weren't actually coming out and asking, "Are you a rapist?" Right? Are you a pedophile? They were asking questions about their behavior and their tendencies and things that are important to them and what they would do in a particular situation. And do you have like a number in mind of the percentage of men out of all of the participants that showed men who were potentially dangerous on college campuses?
Of college students?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would hope that it was a very small percent. But you are right that our culture, I think perhaps in an attempt to just encourage us to protect ourselves, has created this idea that there is more of a threat, that it would be a high number. I'm just going to guess 5%, because I'm going to try and be optimistic.
Wow. Yeah, actually, you guessed even lower than what it actually was. It was 7%, which I think for most women, like their experience of their personal safety is that number would be much higher than that. Right. Yeah.
And I think that if, it's interesting how even thinking about this question is challenging me to look at my own assumptions about men. But I think you're right. I think the general thought is that it's, a higher number of men. I do think that on a college campus among college-age men, hopefully it would be a lower percentage than if you took a wider pool of people. But that is interesting.
Yeah.
I'm glad to know that it's a low number.
Right. Yeah, it is a low number. And this goes back into the partnership principles that we've been talking about on some of the other episodes, is that voice in our head, right, that will hallucinate. And so because our worry center is so large, that we're always concerned for our own safety and for the safety of those people that we care about, our tribe, right?
Right.
And because of that, do you have a sense of the last time that you were, like, frightened for your physical safety? Like, is that something that happens pretty regularly for you?
I would consider myself probably somewhat of a scaredy cat or worrywart, you could say, to the extent that I very much avoid being out at night by myself. If I am driving somewhere at night or have to go to the store or something, I always try to park underneath a street light. Try to always have my dog with me. As you mentioned, I feel a lot of security knowing that. But I feel that, yeah, my perception of danger is probably more than what's realistic.
Yeah. Last night, for example, I had gone to the park with my date, and we watched the sunset and let our dogs run around. And he walked me to my car, and then he ended up leaving before I did. I had a bunch of text messages that I needed to take a look at, and then I had to program in the directions because I'm new here, so I'm completely reliant on Google Maps.
I think most people are.
And I had this moment of, oh, lock the doors. And then even when I was driving away, I heard a rustling in the back seat, and I mean, my dog was with me, right? But so in those two instances, this was just last night, and the next day prior to that, I could probably list off half a dozen times that I was concerned for my physical safety. When men hear this, they're shocked. They're shocked because it just doesn't happen very often. And the reason is because they are testosterone-based human beings. They are bigger and stronger than we are in most situations. And even when the physical stature of a man is shorter than we are, because we're pretty tall, they're still stronger because they have up to 30 times the amount of testosterone that we produce. And I just think that alone, if men can understand how frequently that we don't feel safe and that there are things that they can do and say that will help reassure us. Sometimes it's just checking in. You mentioned in another podcast when your partner is out playing, right, because he's a musician, when he comes home and he's later than you expect him to be, you're worried like crazy, you're not sleeping well, and then the next day you're off, right? So it has a really big impact on us, and very simple consideration is something that will make a big difference. Sending a text message, hey, I'm fine, I'm going to be a little late, or, right? Like just checking in with us. We require connection. Connection gives us a boost of oxytocin, which is a feel-good hormone. It's our connecting hormone. We feel really awesome when we have lots of oxytocin floating around in our bodies. So that is something that will make a really big difference in your relationship with women, is just to reassure them that you're there, you got their back.
Right.
Yeah.
And just having that awareness that, she's probably worried. She's probably worried about something. What could I do to just calm any worries about this situation or that situation? Because you're right. And I think for a lot of the time, the woman, doesn't necessarily want to say, oh, I'm so worried about this, oh, I'm so worried about that.
Yeah.
So the idea that, men can just kind of, take that, kind of extra step to think that, all right, well, what is she probably worried about here? What could I do to make this a safer situation?
Yeah, and what's even stronger in that situation, Corrina, is just asking. Just asking. Is there anything that I can do for you that would cause you to not worry about me when I'm out in the world? Like if you're in relationship, right?
Right.
Or if it's your daughter, honey, would you tell me about the times when you don't feel safe, when you're worried?
Yeah.
I'd love to know what those are and see if there's anything that I can do to support you in that. Yeah, it makes a huge, huge difference. And so here's the conundrum with my clientele that I work with, because I work with a lot of millennial men. I even work with college-age men and women too. But the majority of people that I'm working with these days are really confused young men who, culturally right now, it is pushing towards this genderless society, right? Gender neutrality and all these big question marks around being a good human being who has a penis. How do you do that? And so I was just working with a client the other day, and there were some issues that came up because he was feeling really, really bad that he wasn't being a better boyfriend to his girlfriend because they spent a lot of time together. Almost all the time that he had free, he spent with his girlfriend, and he just had these feelings of needing some alone time and some space. But he didn't want to ask for it because he was really worried that she would then think that there were problems in the relationship and that, he wasn't giving her what she needed. And, she was drawn to have him close all the time because of the oxytocin. They live in New York City, so it's a pretty high-stress city, and your sense of safety there is challenged a lot. Yeah. So having a man who's with her almost all the time,
it's very comforting.
Very comforting. Her nervous system was geared way down, which she loved. And she would also talk to him about absolutely everything that was going on in her life. They were, she really wanted to be best friends. That doesn't work for a man's brain and there's an actual feeling that takes place of needing distance when they have too much oxytocin. It lowers their testosterone levels, which causes them to feel completely off balance and like something is really wrong. And the way that they can restore that, the way they can restore their testosterone levels is through having alone time. Having some distance, having some time away. So one of the things that you can do as a man to help support your relationship with women is to be really clear with them about what you need and that it's not personal. Yeah. And reassure them there's nothing wrong. I just really need to, I like to call it particle time, right? So like when we're together a lot, that's like wave time, quantum physics, right? You're a wave, you're with people, and then sometimes we just need particle time. We just need time by ourselves. And it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, if you're introvert or extrovert, right? Like this is a universal thing that we can ask for in our partners is just for some time alone. And sometimes it might just be transition time. That like when you get home from work and you've been in, hunter mode all day producing results and tending to different people's needs all day long, and then to come home and to just be able to maybe connect, but then have, however much time you need. Might be 10 minutes, might be an hour, where the way that you might restore yourself and get back into your feminine energy is to, run a bath, right? Or take a long hot shower. So different ways that you can take care of yourself, and going back to this idea of partnership that you can be accountable for holding your own space, for clearing out your space, for coming back into that like yummy, juicy, feminine side of yourself to then interact with your partner. Or if it's him coming home from work and you're already there, that he has the opportunity to connect, right? Oh, he's home. I don't have to worry about the tiger. And then giving him time and space to just whatever, do nothing. Actually, when a man is doing nothing but flipping through channels on the TV, they've done studies to show it boosts his testosterone level. So don't look at it like he's not doing something and he's ignoring you. You can look at it like, oh, he's taking care of himself. He's getting his testosterone levels back up to normal so that he can be his best self.
I think that, maybe the underlying, kind of message or whatever is just that we're communicating those needs to the person that we're with.
Yeah.
And, I think a lot of times, women are very comfortable expressing themselves, as, you kind of talked about. There's like more of a linguistic center, more of that emotional kind of reactionary side. But I think maybe for men, they maybe just don't feel as comfortable saying, hey, I need some space, or I need this, or I need that, whatever.
Yeah.
To just be true to themselves and know that if you're telling your partner what you want, you're doing them a service, rather than, having all of these like negative thoughts around it, or as it's a bad thing, that we see it as a good thing, that we're able to just be open and communicative about what it is that we want and need.
Yeah, we have talked in other episodes about hallucination. Women are not the only ones who hallucinate. Human beings hallucinate. It's part of our survival mechanism to keep us safe. And so men will hallucinate that that they're fine without their needs being met, that they can power through it. They have a real drive to want to make us happy. When we're happy, they literally are happy that we're happy, because it's something that they will take credit for. They get to win at that. And so if we can remember that, and if the men listening will remember that all of these decisions that you make about your partner without actually including her is a way of keeping yourself separate. It's actually adversarial. And so one of the things that this gentleman I was talking with, the client I was working with that was having the trouble with his girlfriend, is he said, she's really fragile, and I don't want to bring this up to her. I don't think she can handle it. And I was like, dude, who is this person that you're talking about? You've made this decision about who she is, and the way that you treat her and talk to her now is that she's this weak person who can't handle difficulties or requests that you have to take care of yourself. And so you're just going to walk on glass and then pretend everything's okay, and she can sense that something's not right because you're not you.
Right.
You're not even there. And you're treating her not like the person you fell in love with and that you miss. And he was like, oh my God, you're right. I totally see it. So how frequently do you do that to the people in your life, where you decide that there's someone who can't handle a request that you have? And maybe that comes from the way that you've asked for it in the past. Or maybe it comes from the way that you've taken that time for yourself by just disappearing and disconnecting. And that triggers her sense of safety and connection, and she freaks the hell out.
And, the unspoken, communication that you could have given her, just the lack of being clear about, hey, I need some space. Hey, I'm going to go, whatever, a couple hours and do this or whatever, where, if you could just have communicated that ahead of time, you would not have had the same reaction. Whereas when, like you said, you just disappear, suddenly, she's not reacting to you needing space. She's reacting to you disappearing.
So what does that conversation sound like, right? This is the question men have. Okay, I see this. I don't know how to say that. So that conversation might sound like, have you noticed things have been really hard between us lately? Like, have you noticed that we're not easy with each other, and we haven't been laughing much or having much fun together? It just kind of feels like work. Right? Like you might bring that up. She'll be like, yeah, what is going on? Like, I'm really freaked out that I'm doing something wrong. No, you're not doing anything wrong. I just noticed that I haven't been letting you know when I need time for myself. So I'm going to need some time for myself, and it's going to look like this. Here's what it's going to provide for me, right? Does this ring a bell from a previous conversation we had? Right? Asking for what you need. And is there anything that you need from me in order to support me in this?
Well, it would be great if you let me know when you're going to be taking this time for yourself.
Cool. How would you like me to let you know?
In person, in a very loving, sweet way.
Yeah. Like, I might even ask, because words of affirmation are my top love language. I might say, I'm going to need you to tell me like 2 things that you really love about me, and then say, I'm going to take this amount of time for myself. And I'm not going to be in communication for this amount of time.
Right.
And then will you be accountable for following up with me if you're going to need more time than that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it all really comes down to these partnership principles, right? This choice to remain in partnership with someone, to be up to something together, to create this extraordinary experience of being in a loving relationship.
Right.
Like, you can do that, and it's not hard work. But there are some really key things, and that's one of them for sure. So here's something that's pretty extraordinary. I love the word extraordinary. And I love the word delightful. It's delightful and extraordinary to ask your partner what her heart's desire is. So this is a conversation, and you can play it like a game. Like, have it be lighthearted. Have the conversation at a time when you're both in a good mood, and like a lazy Sunday, you've had brunch, you're kind of laying around in your pajamas still, and just engage in this game of, if you had it all your way, what would that look like? Like, what would we do? And spend time together, like dreaming about something you could be up to together.
Right.
And you can go like way out. Like, if I had it all my way, we would fly to Fiji for a weekend, and then we would fly to Paris and have lunch. Right? So you can totally play that. But then bring it down to like something real.
Right.
Right? In this situation. So when there's a conflict even, this is a great way to get on the same page together, right? Because you guys love to know, when she's not happy, how do I solve this problem? And you're amazing with problems. Women think that they shouldn't have problems, and have a lot of trouble even admitting there is a problem.
Right.
So when there are conflicts happening and you're not clear on what's going on, just ask, if you had it all your way in this situation, what would that look like? And then give her a chance to, like, give her some time and time space.
Right.
To really recognize that it's a safe question to answer.
Right.
And that you're not going to make fun of her for it, because that's a really vulnerable thing to share. Yeah. Can you kind of think of a situation where, if you had it all your way, what that might look like? And
No.
yeah.
Here, hold on, let me think.
Okay.
I don't know. Sorry, I'm not really.
Yeah. Can I share one of mine? So I really held off for a long time on starting my new business. I'm creating a podcast called He Who Would Be King. and it's geared towards young men who really want to be, they're very invested. This generation of millennials are very invested in being the best kind of human they can be. And they have a lot of confusion around how to do that. And what does that look like? And so I held off on creating this new business because I've been a serial entrepreneur. I've worn a lot of different hats in my lifetime, and I know what's required in it. And I've also been single for a number of years, and I've been really focused on welcoming in a life partner. I really would love to have someone to practice these partnership principles with in creating an extraordinary life. And I felt like it was an and/or situation, that I could do this business, but I couldn't have a relationship too, right? I couldn't have a partnership too. And vice versa, that like if I were to get into a partnership, then I wouldn't have time to focus on a business. And so when I finally got on board with like, yeah, this is what I'm doing, I made it really clear that my heart's desire was for both.
Right.
I want both. I want it all. And so I can enroll someone that I'm dating in that by being really clear about what I need. That here's how much time and energy that I have available to put into a partnership and developing a partnership. And if I had it all my way, we would go slow. Because this is a really crucial time for me as I'm launching my new business.
Right.
And is there anything that you would need from me in order to give me that kind of time and space to focus on my business and still know that building this partnership with you is really important to me?
Right. Well, I think it's I think it's wonderful, of course, for women to now have this encouragement to enter the workplace, to become an entrepreneur, all of these things that, I think for many decades women felt was not something they could do. But at the same time, you're right that it's almost come with an insinuation that it's either or. Like you're either a mom or you're a businesswoman.
Or you're all things, which is why we talked earlier about how exhausted women are, because we're wearing all the hats and we think we should be able to do it all on our own.
Right. And it creates this kind of huge amount of pressure. And the idea that you would have to pick one, and you can't have both is, again, kind of something that, only makes us end up feeling worse, whichever route that we choose, So I think having that openness to knowing that these are two things that I can do together. And then for males to recognize the kind of situation that, the women in their lives are in, and wanting to support that and support them, both in the home life and in the work life.
Yeah.
To whatever extent.
Yeah, so women get so caught up in having to do it all on their own, really choosing to do it all on their own, even when they have a man in their life, and to prove that they can do just as good a job as a man, that it will actually cause a man to feel like he's not needed. And so why would he stick around?
Hopefully because he loves her.
But isn't enough, right? Because she's exhausted and has left nothing for him by the time she gets home, and then is looking to him to fill her back up again. And that's a lot of pressure. That's a lot of pressure to put on anybody, man or woman, right? It doesn't really matter.
Right.
And again, it comes back to how can we be accountable for holding our space and asking for what we need? Honey, would you leave a little something for me? I'm feeling like the least important person in your life because you give everything away to everyone else in the world, to the kids, to all your employees, right? Will you leave something for me? Yeah. And then allowing for receiving, which is such a feminine muscle to develop. Men are not great at it either, but we particularly suck at receiving as women. And so looking at ways that that as a man, maybe that you can create partnership with your partner on what a difference it makes to you when she receives you, when you do something for her in a way that she's asked for, and that when she appreciates that from you and gives you acknowledgement for what a difference that made, and if you can let her know what a difference that makes when she receives you in that deep way.
Right.
Huge. Yeah.
I think that, a lot of times there's probably, that feeling that, that men don't want to have to ask that, or don't want to admit that they're feeling unimportant, or they're feeling like they're not getting any attention from her because she's so busy or whatever. But just to know that, it is okay for you to ask that. And you would want her to ask if she needed something of you. So you should certainly feel, not only that it's okay, but that it's encouraged for you to speak up about what you need.
Absolutely. It's probably one of the greatest things that you can do as a human being, but especially as a man, is a really simple concept. It's just not easy. And that is honor yourself first and then others, or all is lost. Honor yourself first and then others. Because when you sacrifice yourself, you're not available to the partnership anymore. You've taken yourself out. So no one who is in partnership wants their partner to sacrifice themselves. And so if we can both be really clear about what it is that we need and what would make a difference, and that we don't just make assumptions that the other person should already know that. I've lived with her for 20 years. She should know that about me. Right? No. Actually, no. She might not. Or she might have at one point and forgotten and still wants to support you.
Right.
So I think when we don't assume that somebody, right, you love that. Are you going to say it? You love saying it.
We all know what assuming does.
We all know what assuming does. So yeah, and having expectations of people without actually talking to them about it, or making decisions for who they are and what they can handle, without ever including them in on that. Maybe they could handle it if you were to provide something for them that they needed too. And then you could get to be up to these really awesome things where, what's your heart's desire? I mean, men tend to never ask that question of themselves. If I had it all my way, what would that look like? And then how do I involve my partner in that, in making that real? That's freaking exciting.
Right.
That's something exciting to be up to together.
Well, I think that anyone would love to have both partners having their true heart's desire fulfilled. And maybe the biggest, obstacle in that is that we just kind of overthink it too much, or we worry too much that we're not doing enough, or what can I do, or why is she unhappy, or whatever.
Yeah. A lot of times men play for points. They play to win. And if they feel like they can't win with their partner, it's just a game they're not willing to invest their time, money, and energy in.
Yeah. You've got to know that you're both in it together and playing on the same team.
In it to win it, baby. In it to win it. Yeah.
Comes back to the whole original, piece of the partnership in the first place. So do you want to maybe just kind of recap some of these key points that we covered here?
Absolutely. So the first one was, how can you make your partner feel safe and create connection, right? And that doesn't mean being together 24/7, 365. So, and involving her in that question. So number 2 was ask for what you need. Right? That whole thing, honor yourself first and then others, or all is lost. Like literally the entire game is lost if you're not playing in it because you've taken yourself out, because you haven't gotten what you need and you can't show up as your best self. So, and then what does she need from you in order to support you in that? And number 3 is own your hallucinations about who you think she is and what she can handle. Because if she knows you're behind her, women are strong. We are strong. And there's no question about that. The things that we're capable of when we know that somebody's got our back. Yeah. And then changing the conversation to your heart's desire, letting the focus of your relationship go back to those early days where the magic was of like, wow, what can we do together? And how can we support that in each other, knowing the things that are most important to our partner? And how can we get behind that? And so asking the question, if you had it all your way in this situation, what would that look like? And then just dreaming about it, coming up with a plan, getting on the same team, right? Yeah, I got goosebumps just even thinking about that. It really gets me excited.
Right. And I think for men to know that, it is a relationship is a two-way street. And as much as they want to know that they are, satisfying their partner and being the partner that she wants him to be, that she's just as worried about what she can do to keep him happy. And, is she doing things right? Or is she too smothering? Or is she too this? And just kind of that very clear, communication, of course, keeps coming up, but just for both parties to remember that, like, hey, we both need each other. We both play these really important roles in each other's lives. And so just as much as one partner is sitting there worried, wondering if they're doing the right thing, knowing that your partner is probably also sitting there asking those same questions. So how do you come together with this kind of union of your heart's desire? Well, what is the ideal scene for both of us to be able to be completely fulfilled and happy?
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. And I really want to take a moment to express what a difference it makes to have men just show up as their best self in the world, that your investment, that you're taking the time to really want to be the best human being that you can be. But there are things you naturally provide as a man that make a difference. They really make a difference in our lives. And I don't think you get to hear that nearly enough, how much you're appreciated for the things that you do and the ways that you show up, naturally protecting, naturally wanting to provide happiness for other people. I've done research with hundreds of men now, and one of the main things that I ask them is what are the things that are most important to you in your life? And almost all of them have said, it's really important to me that the people in my life are happy and that I get to do something that helps with that. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for making that so important. And I'm sorry we make it so hard for you to succeed at that. And I really hope that this information that I share about creating and upholding partnership and being better partners to each other will make a difference, so that there's just more happiness in the whole world, and that we get to support each other in doing that.
Oh, well, you are definitely doing so much to spread that happiness and share this information. And I'm so grateful, Jules, for you sharing this with us today. And I really look forward to continuing these conversations.
Me too. Yeah.
And I know that we've, again, just kind of barely scratched the surface here. So a lot more to explore. And thank you so much for joining me here today.
Thank you for having me, Corrina.
I want to thank all of you for listening and tuning in. You can learn more about Jules at julesharrison.com, and I hope that you will join us again very soon. Thank you so much for watching and or listening. We'll see you again next time.